The other raffle is going to be amongst the staff. They're guessing betting if I can really finish this thing in an hour. Pretty sure my wife said it's 50-50. I'm catching a flight to go see them, but I'm going to prove her wrong. I can get this done. Thank y'all for being here. Like Blake said, we believe your body's designed to be well, and it's lack of knowledge, lack of stewardship that has got us all sick. And those testimonies, he said, kidney disease, diabetes, infertility, reverse, I didn't see any of those people. It's not about me. And that's the point of today's talk, is to try to get the focus off the doctor and off a man. Really, I read in a book somewhere, if you put your faith in a man, you're a fool. So don't put your faith in me. Put your faith in the one who made me and made you and made the body to work right. And just in case I get long-winded, I saw this morning. We have peacocks, and I was walking down the driveway to go feed all the animals because the family's gone, so it's my job to do that. And this was on the driveway. So I took a picture of it. And if you just remember one slide today, remember this one. I mean, that feather, and you can come up later and see it if you want. I mean, it is incredible, the design in that one feather. And a peacock has like 100 of these. And if you've never really looked close at a peacock, when they fan that tail out, it's layered. There's short ones and the next length, all the way up to these really long ones. And they just fan out perfectly, symmetrically. And I mean, and they shed them twice a year and grow new ones. I mean, how does he know how to grow the short, the medium, the next, all the way up? And each one of these are individual strands, like a piece of hair. And it's got to be light blue, and then turn a little darker, then real dark, and then not so dark, and then brown, and then lighter green, darker green, and it's got to have a curve in it. And the neighbor next to it's just a little shorter than that. And the color's got to coordinate to make that eyeball look. I mean, you could camp out on just this peacock feather all day looking at this and just in amazement of the design that God put into that peacock feather. It's incredible. So, trust the designer. That's the whole point. God intends for you to be well. The devil intends for you to be sick, steal, kill, and destroy. And he does it through deception, counterfeit, lack of knowledge. So, I'm going to try to show you today the root cause of all disease. Hippocrates said, illness does not come upon us out of the blue. It's developed from small daily sins. I don't know about that word. We'll talk about that in a minute. Against nature. When enough sins have accumulated, illness will suddenly appear. So that's one guy's opinion of where disease comes from. It comes from some root cause. In medical school, more than half the diseases they taught us about, unknown etiology, this word right here, a disease of unknown etiology, meaning we don't know the cause. Hypertension, a disease of unknown etiology. And almost all diseases are diseases of unknown etiology according to your doctor's school that trained your doctor. We are not taught to ask what's causing high blood sugar, what's causing cancer, what's causing hypertension, what's causing all these things. We don't ask those questions in med school. They sure don't teach them. They use this word a lot. Unknown etiology. So here's what putting your wisdom in a man, and as a man, all right, can y'all hear me better? So when you decide to follow the wisdom of a man, here's the results we get. 0.08%, 0%, 1.9%, 3% in 3 weeks. These are the outcomes for conventional medical therapies. The top 1.8%, that's what the number one treatment for cardiovascular disease, which is the number one killer in America. The number one treatment for it is a statin, which lowers your cholesterol. The benefit of that statin on cardiovascular mortality is less than 1%. That's the best man can come up with using man's wisdom. There's a way that seems right to man. And the way that seems right to the conventional U.S. medical man and woman get you a 0.8% benefit for the number one killer. The root cause of diabetes is not a deficiency of diabetic medicine. If you look at the diabetes classes I recorded a few weeks ago, it's on the website, you will see studies where they looked at what's the long-term data for these diabetics that get on medication to lower their blood sugar, to get an A1C down to 6.9 instead of 8.9. That's the two groups they compared. Did it create less heart attack, less stroke, less dialysis, less blindness, less amputation, all the things that diabetics get? And the answer was no. Tight control versus less tight control using medication for diabetes got you 0% benefit. Putting a drug into the body to cause you to urinate out the excess sugar does not benefit you, according to the literature. Chemotherapy, this was a study from a number of years ago. How much does chemotherapy contribute to the 5-year survival? 1.9%. Antidepressants, the study came out in 2006, and it's a study every psychiatrist points to that said a 68%, almost 70% improvement in depression symptoms if you get on an SSRI, Zoloft, Paxil, Lexapro. And that is the study that's the bedrock foundational study for all of psychiatry in 2006. 10 years later, that data was reanalyzed, and it turned out the data was manipulated, and it was 3%. I talked to the investigative journalist who looked into that, Robert Whitaker, did a podcast with him not too long ago. Go back on the website, you can listen to that. Alzheimer's drugs that target beta amyloid plaque, the benefit of those, 3 weeks more, it keeps you out of the nursing home. So these are real numbers from the literature. When you put your hope, trust, and faith in a man's wisdom of how to fix disease, because we're not taught to fix disease, we're taught to manage disease. We're taught to manage that blood sugar instead of reverse. Get to the root cause of why can't your mitochondria burn that sugar? Your carburetor should be able to burn sugar. When it can't, it backs up in the fuel line and spills over into your blood, and your doctor measures it, says it's high, and gives you a drug to pee it out. Fix the carburetor. We'll talk about that in a minute. These education courses, Blake mentioned them on the website. You can look at that. Autoimmune diabetes, heart disease. I go way more in depth on that 0.8% and the 0% for diabetes. So go check those out. And then the medications that we use and the system that we use, by the most conservative estimates, is a third leading cause of death. So the drugs and procedures that we're doing to get 0 to 3% benefit is, on the more liberal estimates, the number one cause of death. So back to Hippocrates. The point of that first couple slides was just for new folks, to open your mind, because I was taught, I graduated from UT Houston. I went across the stage, MD Anderson's, where I did most of my rotations, and I got my diploma, my white coat, my MD behind my name. And I thought I just learned everything there is to help y'all. I'll just learn the best of the best of the best, because we're the best. And MD Anderson's the best. And nothing against the hardworking people that work in that hospital, but it is a system. And it's not the best. And I didn't know any of those numbers. I didn't understand that the Lipitor I was handing out like candy gave a 0.8% benefit only. So it's a false sense of security. That's the big beef I have. Folks are walking around uninformed with a false sense of security that they're doing something to benefit and reduce their risk. I mean, we die younger than any other country, and it continues to, the gap widens, and we've dropped from about 79. When I was giving this lecture 10 years ago, we're still in last place, but at least we're kind of in the pack. We're way away from the pack now. Everybody else stayed around 79, 80. We're down to 76. It dropped a year recently, and that's a huge drop to drop an entire year. So if you're not informed that the standard American medical education, the standard American healthcare system is a sick care symptom management system that gives you these horrible outcomes, you die the youngest and you're sickest while you're kind of waiting to die. But so Hippocrates says all disease begins in the gut. How could that be? The microbiome, these little critters, these bacteria that live in your gut, They're pretty incredible, and it's a pretty new discovery. When I graduated from medical school in 2002, there was the first 2 studies with that word microbiome in it. And now this is just 2015. There are over 2,000 studies, and there's more now. We're learning a lot about the microbes in the gut. Here's just a little bit of what we learned. There's 1 bacteria, so we're supposed to have 30,000 different gut bacteria, a wide variety, diversity. When we go study tribes in Amazon or Africa, they have 30,000 different species. The average American's down to 5,000 because of the food we eat that's chemical and antibiotic laden, and the stress we're under and the toxins we're putting on our skin all day kills our microbiome. The chronically sick Americans has about 500 of these species. One of these species, Lactobacillus rhamnosus, this researcher in Australia, gave it to these kids with peanut allergies, and 80% of those kids reversed their peanut allergy with that 1 strain of bacteria. We have discovered 94 different strains of bacteria that break down gluten. So if you're gluten sensitive, most likely you don't have those 94 different strains. Out of the 30,000 we're supposed to have, there's probably more than 94. That's just what we've figured out so far. This one, this particular bacteria, Oxalobacter formenges, when you have enough of that, you don't get kidney stones. Antibiotics wipe that out, was the point of this study. Erythromycin and amoxicillin and azithromycin really knock out the Oxalobacter. These 4, FLVR, if you don't have enough of those, your kids are more likely to have asthma. There's something about those bacteria that communicate and talk to the immune system that tells the immune system, quit attacking the lungs. Don't be so hypersensitive and ready to fire off in the lungs. There's a whole lot more. That was just a brief little snippet. You can go watch the, I don't know if it's out yet, IBS talk. If it's not out, it will be soon, but I go through a whole lot more. All right, so the gut's pretty important. Hippocrates says all disease starts in the gut. That was not a deep dive in the gut. That was a tiny little snippet to get you to understand the microbes in the gut is really where the health is at. So we're going to encourage you to eat real food, because real food fertilizes and feeds those bacteria. Processed food-like substances, which is what a standard American puts in their mouth, kills those bacteria and gets you down to that 5,000, maybe 500. We want to grow that back up, and you can. Be in nature. Don't sterilize your hands all the time with antibacterial stuff. Eat fermented food. Eat real food. It's pretty simple, actually. And then trust the gut. Those bacteria in your gut make vitamin C, different B vitamins, vitamin K. It's your backup system. Those gut bacteria make your dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, all the brain chemistry. There's a gut-brain connection. Those bugs need to thrive to make that chemistry, melatonin, so that your brain can be healthy. I'm not going to go off anymore on that. There's a whole lot more to say on the gut. Hippocrates said, let the food be the medicine and the medicine be the food. This smart guy, he won a couple Nobel Prizes, said he could trace every disease down to a mineral deficiency. We get our minerals from our food and from the water. We used to get our minerals from the food. I love these local vendors. Glad y'all came and supported them. They're trying to grow things the right way. They're trying to grow animals and plants the right way, meaning they tend to the soil. They steward the soil, and they steward their animals. But if you steward that soil right, microbes will come back and minerals will come back. Morley said there's no such thing as medical disease. There's only metabolic dysfunction that's caused by mineral deficiency. And he proved that out with many, many podcasts I did with him. You can go listen to that if you really want all the science. This slide's a little busy, but I'll summarize it. This is the farming techniques when they started to change mechanized farming. That's around 1929. Mechanized means the plow. When the plow goes through the soil, it disrupts the fungi. The fungi in the soil is what gives the soil that spongy chocolate cake consistency, porous soil that can hold and retain water. It's up to the fungi to create the soil that holds water. Bacteria live on the water droplets. The bacteria work on the stone and the sand and the rock to get the minerals off the rock into a water-soluble form the roots can take up and put into the spinach and the cabbage and the apples and the carrots. You've got to have the bacteria. The bacteria live on the water, and the water is held when the fungi are in the soil. So mechanization, or the plow, disrupts the fungi, and what happened? These are minerals: phosphorus, selenium, copper, magnesium, cobalt. Minerals started to go down. So when you have a demineralized plant, you have a weakened plant. A weakened plant is more susceptible to pest and disease and doesn't grow so good. So in man's wisdom, we brought ammonium nitrate in, a very narrow synthetic fertilizer, and it caused a lot of growth in the plant, and it brought a lot of green color to the plant, but it grew so fast, so rapidly, and the minerals became imbalanced. You can't just put 2 big minerals in. What about all the rest? That imbalance and the rapid growth both led to worse mineralization of the plant. So the plant gets even weaker, more susceptible to bugs. So pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides come in to kill all the pests and bugs that are attacking a weakened plant. If you have a strong plant, it's going to resist the bugs. Talk to any gardener who's really well versed in regenerative ag, and he'll tell you there's no bugs on my garden. My neighbor's garden's full of them, and they're right next door to each other, because a strong plant's going to be able to resist those bugs. So when we bring in these pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, we're not only killing the pest on the leaves, we're killing the bugs in the soil. The bacteria in the soil are damaged by all these different chemicals. And remember, the bacteria is what's working on the rock to get the mineral to the plant. So we just see this major decline in minerals in our food. And this other line going up, that's cancer, obesity, asthma. We see multiple different chronic diseases, heart disease, go up as the minerals go down. That's why we push minerals so hard. Sea salt in your water, sea salt on your food. Buy organic when you can. Organic's going to have a little more mineral. Buy regenerative when you can. Eat the organ meats. If you want to know a recipe, there's whole cow beef, and other vendors were here too. Get the recipe and eat your liver. One recipe I did the other day. Get a little chunk of liver, wrap it in bacon, toothpick through it, salt and pepper, 450 in the oven on a baking sheet for 15 minutes. You have little nuggets. The last thing that came in, glyphosate, that's Roundup. Roundup is a chelator. It claws or grabs and it chelates the minerals and holds on to them where they're not accessible to the plant or to you. Glyphosate was the final nail in the coffin, and we see the minerals go to just about zero. These are correlation graphs, glyphosate and disease. Glyphosate really started to come in the 90s. The red line is that's Roundup, glyphosate. And the blue line is just the GMO crop. And you can see the correlation. As GMO and glyphosate go up, this is thyroid cancer. This is death from senile dementia, Alzheimer's. This is celiac compared to glyphosate use. This is renal failure, kidney failure, and death. Correlation doesn't mean causation, but it should mean investigation. And when you investigate, what you're going to find is it took 26 apples in 1997 to equal what was in 2 apples in 1958 for copper. And it's not just copper, it's all of them. Across the board. Cabbage, carrots, kale, all of them. 43 different garden crops this professor at UT Austin studied, and they all were severely depleted when you compared 1950s to 1990s. And 1990s was a good while ago, so it's even worse now. Interesting to note, in his study, he talks about how farmers started using different varieties, planting different varieties instead of heirloom, varieties that had other traits. And that's all he said was some other traits. But when you dig into what are the other traits, increased productivity, increased conformation, big, plump, red, can take a bump, take a bruise, be shipped across. There are certain traits and qualities they wanted in these vegetables, and it caused the nutrient value to go down. We know this with Weston A. Price in the 1920s when all this chronic disease started to come. We used to not have chronic disease. Heart attacks started in 1912. There was one in the entire country, and now there's 700,000, probably going to be this year. There's a medical procedure that got implemented in 21 that really increased the rates of that by about 100,000. But anyways, Weston Price traveled the world, 14 different people groups all over the world, and he found no cancer, no hypertension, no cavities, crooked teeth, no mental disease, no disease, period. Even tuberculosis, which was an infectious, very infectious bacteria, he found villages that were completely resistant to TB. TB was all around them. In this village, no problem. They were strong. They were healthy. They were robust. Your immune system knows how to find COVID, flu, TB, cancer cells, and everything else. It is the most amazingly designed germ, toxin, cancer detecting system known to man. Colonoscopies, pap smears, mammograms, and all the cancer screening tests will never surpass your body's surveillance system that God put into it. But it needs to be stewarded. Those cells need to have energy. We'll get into that in a minute. This graph I love because it gives an example of what these vitamins, how important these vitamins are. So I know that's small writing, but I'll interpret here. This is death rate in folks that have Parkinson's, which is a lack of dopamine coming out of the brain. So this is 1950 here, 1960, 1970. This death rate was really pretty stable for decades, actually kind of going down a little bit, but very, very stable for decades. So if you had Parkinson's, you tended to live to a certain age and it was just stable. And then all of a sudden something happened in 1978 and we started to see a slight rise, but then the rise continued and continued and continued. And this is a 371% rise from 1976, not 78, to 2015. A huge rise in death rate amongst Parkinson's patients, dying from colon cancer, heart attack, strokes, all causes. Dr. Marty Hines, in this paper, proposes the reason for that is a drug called carbidopa-levodopa. It's still the primary drug used for Parkinson's today. Dopamine is a deficiency that leads to the Parkinson's symptoms. Dopamine, if you just gave dopamine by itself, which is what we used to do, causes a lot of GI symptoms like nausea and vomiting and loss of appetite. So people tend to quit taking it because of those side effects. So they figured out how to add carby onto the dopa, carbidopa. Carby prevents the nausea, so people will stay on it better. Unfortunately, carbidopa irreversibly binds to and permanently deactivates pyroxyl 5-phosphate, POP, the active form of vitamin B6. Vitamin B6 is permanently disabled by that medication. And I'm not telling you to get off your carbidopa if you're on it today. I'm just educating you and telling you there are side effects to man's wisdom. Putting something into the chemistry of the body to do one targeted specific thing is going to have unintended consequences. There are over 300 enzymes. Enzymes do the work in the body. 300 enzymes that need B6. There's probably more than that. You can't just knock out B6 and expect to not have consequences. An enzyme, for instance, when the sun hits your skin, which we highly recommend sun, it's good for you. But when it hits your skin, it changes the cholesterol in your skin into vitamin D. That doesn't just presto happen out of nowhere. It's an enzyme that cleaves and chops something off of that cholesterol molecule and then puts something on it. The enzymes are the workers. These particular enzymes require B6 to work. If you don't have B6, those workers are just sitting on the sideline not doing their job. That's just one example of one nutrient. Here's all the different B vitamins that are needed in the citric acid cycle: B1, B2, B3, B6, multiple different steps. And this is your energy production cycle. You need vitamins, obviously, for the body to work. And we get it from our food and from our gut bacteria. This is a very complex chart. I memorized it all in med school, I'm sure. I'm just kidding. Imagine that was just one little tiny piece of this. Imagine how many minerals and vitamins are needed for this complex thing to work. And a human being thinks he can get in there and tinker with that with a pharmaceutical and not have unintended consequences. There's a reason we're the sickest, dying the youngest. There's a reason heart disease is rising despite half the people being on statins. We've got to get to the reason, the root cause. Probably y'all all know this: vitamin C deficiency and scurvy. Anemia can be iron, copper, B12, vitamin D deficiency, rickets, B3. That's niacin, causes pellagra, which is a dementia, skin rash, and diarrhea. I mean, there are obvious real diseases from just one nutrient depletion. But you go across the board, deplete them all, especially the minerals. Remember Linus Pauling, the two-time Nobel Prize winner, said he could trace every single disease to a mineral deficiency. So you can start to get an idea of what we've done to ourselves through the poor stewardship of the farm and the food and this. And yet the body still, we're still averaging 76 years. Everyone else is at 80, but still, it's amazing the resiliency in the body. And believe me, this is sound depressing, I know, but we're going to turn here in a minute and get not depressing. It's incredible what your body will do if you just give it a little bit. And if you give a little bit more and a little bit more, it will take it and run. It is incredible. And mostly, it's right here. It's right between your ears. What you believe. We'll talk about that in a minute. Walking is man's best medicine. I didn't know Hippocrates said that till I was looking through all these quotes the other day. And I'm using Hippocrates because he was pre-pharmaceutical. Most people think he's pretty smart, and he probably was, still is. I mean, when you look at these quotes, a lot of it really is pretty right on the money. 9,815 different molecules get released when you start to move. We have no idea the complexity of these 9,800 molecules. What all are they doing? Someone who sits all day for 8 hours has a diminished lifespan. Just by sitting, you can eat perfect, drink perfect, do everything perfect. You sit all day for 8 hours. There are negative consequences. That's why it's called sitting's the new smoking. Here's just one of the negative consequences, depression. I found this study the other day because we're about to release anxiety depression class on the wellness site. A new study shows that physical activity is 1.5 times more effective than counseling or leading medications for depression and anxiety. So why aren't we prescribing that right out of the gate, first thing? And then you start stewarding your microbes who make the brain chemistry, and you decrease brain inflammation when you eat real food and you get the sunshine, or real quick, the sweet spot on exercise, because you can overdo it. Don't overdo it. Don't make it too intense. The sweet spot is walk for an hour a day, or garden, golf, moderate exercise. You don't have to kill it. And then resistance training on top of that, 40 to 60 minutes a week, you need to work your muscle. The muscle is super important. We need to maintain muscle mass, especially the last half of our life. Grip strength, you can measure that with a little gadget. It's more predictive of longevity than blood pressure and cholesterol. Everybody's so worried about their blood pressure and cholesterol numbers, and they track them every time they go to the doctor. And more predictive than those is how strong you are. And grip strength correlates to your overall strength. Just moving is huge. You can move through our exercise movement pillar. There are tests you can do coming out of this book, Built to Move. Kelly and Juliet, their husband-wife team, they're physical therapists. My sister Emily's a physical therapist, and she talked to them and got permission to use these exercises that they have shown in studies to test whether you will have good longevity. Can you stand on one foot and turn and twist and put on a shoe? And I don't have all this memorized, but there's some certain specific simple tests you can do on your own. Get on the website, click on the test, do them, and see. If you're flexible, if you have good balance, if you can do these things, that's great. Probably means you've been moving good. And if you can't, there's exercises that Emily goes through that can teach you how to do that. One of my, I don't know if I call him a mentor, but I've gone to a few lectures of Dr. Jerry Tennant, talked to him on the phone multiple times. He's taught me a lot. I'm not going to go into his whole deal, but healing is voltage. So Dr. Tennant's an ophthalmologist in Keller, Texas. He's probably 82 years old now. And when he was in his late 60s, I believe, he invented the LASIK laser for LASIK surgery. And he was going around the world teaching doctors how to do LASIK surgery. And when you're burning through the cornea, it releases smoke from the cornea. He was breathing that in. He contracted some kind of germs through that, is what he thinks. But he got viral encephalitis, inflammation of the brain, shut him down. He couldn't function, had fatigue, was in bed 16 hours a day, couldn't remember his patient's name, couldn't remember how to write a prescription, couldn't remember how to run his laser, couldn't do anything. He went to the top neurologists at Harvard, Mayo, Hopkins. They all said the same thing. You've got a virus in your brain, viral encephalitis, nothing we can do about it. There's no treatment for it. Get on disability, go home, and just live your remaining days. Dr. Tennant, who knew nothing about holistic, but he's desperate, and most people that are desperate will go look into holistic doctors, and he went to Arizona and Mexico and different places. And basically, what he figured out was nutrition's important. For a cell to function, it needs minerals, it needs vitamins, it needs sunshine, but it needs voltage, electrons, energy. And his whole book, Healing is Voltage, is pretty fascinating. And it gets into the electrical circuits in the body. It's kind of like your breaker box at home. You know, you have circuits in your house, the bedroom, the kitchen, the range and stove. You have circuits in your body. They're called acupuncture meridians. We didn't even believe in this. The Chinese have known about it for 2,000 years. Americans laughed at them all this time until the late 1970s or mid 1970s. I think it was Nixon that went to China. The press corps went with them. Ralston was a journalist. I think it was for the Washington Post. Ralston got appendicitis when he was in China, went to the hospital. They used acupuncture for the anesthesia. And he did fine and felt good and had no pain, came home and wrote a story about it. And all of a sudden America was enlightened that acupuncture is real. It's not hocus pocus. We're so arrogant over here somehow. But back to Tennant, he figured out these acupuncture meridians, they all run through a tooth. They all run through a muscle group. And when you move, that muscle generates, like a generator, electrons for that circuit and keeps it energized. And a cell cannot repair and regenerate without enough voltage. So battery packs is what he calls the muscles. And guess how you charge your battery pack? Don't sit all day. Move. But it's cool science. And if you want to go learn and you really need more science to prove stuff to your intellect to get up and move, then go read his book. It's awesome. Little caveat, side note on that. The two things that drain these circuits the most, root canals and unresolved emotions, bitterness, unforgiveness, anger, resentment. Dr. Jack Kruse, if you go look him up, be careful. He has a potty mouth, so if you don't like bad words, don't listen to him. And I'll summarize it. The sun is super important. Jack Kruse was about 200 pounds overweight, and he'd done every diet in the world, and then he figured out, whoa, I'm missing one big nutrient called sunshine. Sunshine is not only waves, energetic waves, there's photons, light particles. Those light particles go in through your skin, hook into the mitochondria, your carburetor. They're photoreceptors in your body for light. And he figured out how to utilize that light, and he lost 200 pounds and feels great, and he teaches all about sunshine. So move to charge your batteries and move outside in the sun. And it's not just sun hitting your skin. It's through the optic nerve to the brain, resets a lot of metabolic pathways, circadian rhythm, interacts with your brain and your full body by seeing the first morning sun. So go outside in the morning. That's what I was doing when I found the peacock feather. And there's different wavelengths at sunset. Go out and watch the sunset. There's great benefit for your physical body and your soul. Nature, a superior antidepressant. This last child in the woods, saving our children from nature deficient disorder. Fascinating book, talks about all the different negative ramifications on a child's health when they stay inside too much. I just was looking at the mood because I was doing the anxiety depression lecture slides, so that's why I just focused on that. But in these kids, it showed just being inside increases ADHD, anxiety, and depression. And the number one reason these parents were keeping their kids inside was fear. The parents' fear of stuff happening, or they're getting a germ or whatever outside, the sun. All right, so now we're getting to the real common denominator here. How does all this, Hippocrates said your gut's important, your food's important, you got to walk, Jack Kruse in the sun, voltage, all these things, you can trace them back to one common denominator. And what they're impacting mostly is your mitochondria. And your mitochondria is your carburetor. That makes the energy for your cell to work. So if you've got brain fog, it means your brain cells, neurons, aren't making enough energy, and they might be making too much exhaust, free radicals. And that causes oxidative stress and inflammation, which causes symptoms that we label and call it a disease. I saw a new patient yesterday, 33 years old. She was in bed for 60 straight days, January and February of this year. She's been really sick since she was 15 years old, and she's 33. But tracing it back, she was really sick since she was 2 months old. Actually, really since the birth canal. Super colicky, projectile vomiting as an infant. That's a clue that she didn't have enough stomach acid. Her stomach acid pumps need to pump very aggressively to get the pH down to 1 in the stomach. Battery acid's 1.5. That's what we need to be. And when a baby's not there, or when you're not there, this valve won't close properly, the valve between the esophagus and stomach. That baby was projectile vomiting because he didn't have enough stomach acid. They put her on Zantac. That Zantac shut the pumps off even more, so the valve's still wide open. There's just nothing to projectile out. Tried multiple different formulas. For 9 months, this baby was colicky, screaming, crying, and projectile vomiting. Then at 18 months, got a bad case of asthmatic and pneumonia and put in the hospital, put on steroids and antibiotics, and then had another round of antibiotics by 24 months, and then had antibiotics 2 to 3 times a year until she was in elementary school, until she got her tonsils out. So she had very little gut microbiome, because the pH, when you have proper pH in the stomach, that creates an environment for the microbes to thrive and grow and reproduce and make babies. Her pH was off. She wasn't reproducing microbes. Then she got wiped out with formula. Formula does not feed the good bugs. It actually feeds the bad bugs. And then the antibiotics killed the gut flora even more. So she's getting strep and mono and flu and all through elementary and junior high, and just goes to the doctor and gets antibiotics and antibiotics and antibiotics. And then at 15 gets diagnosed with Raynaud's, an autoimmune disease. And then at 16, 17, she got diagnosed with fibromyalgia. And then by the time she was 18, it was lupus. So she's been dealing with lupus. She's on 9 or 10 medications. She's 33 years old. The medicines aren't working. They keep switching them, doing higher doses, switching them, higher doses, switching them, higher doses. Somehow in there got pregnant, lost the baby. At 3 months old, the baby died. Her baby died. And then she really cratered. And then the medicines kind of got her sort of stable. And it's just been this 10 years from 23 to 33 of misery. And her rheumatologist in Midland didn't know what else to do, sent her to a special rheumatologist in San Antonio. The specialist in San Antonio told her, you're going to start chemotherapy. We've got to kill your immune system because your immune system won't quit attacking yourself. The 3 different autoimmune diseases. And she's a nurse too. And she thought holistic was quackery. But something in her at 33 years old, when she can't get out of bed for 60 days and the answer is chemotherapy once a week to kill her immune system, something in her said, there's got to be something we're not seeing right. And so we walked through things yesterday and connected some dots all the way back to the womb to show her and convince her intellect, because she's a nurse and she's type A and she's a list girl and all the things she told me. And she needs to know the why behind things. And so we got to go through pretty much everything Hippocrates just said about the gut and the microbes and the nutrition. She was a standard American. Her food was devoid of nutrition. And so she's going to start on her path of remineralizing and getting her vitamins, getting her probiotics, getting her pharmacy back in her gut. Those gut bugs know what to make and when to make it. The gut bugs talk to the immune system and tell the immune system, I showed y'all asthma earlier, that's an autoimmune. Those 4 bugs that tell the immune system not to attack the lungs, that lady yesterday, she's missing bacteria that will tell her to quit attacking her joints. But her biggest obstacle, after 2 hours I spent with her, I could see it in her eyes, and I was like this too. It's this double-minded thing. Doc, everything you said, that's really makes sense to really, it was her spirit. But her intellect kept saying, how could this be? And she kept saying, but I have lupus. Or does this mean I don't have lupus? These doctors have told me I have lupus. She was stuck on that name, the label. So I said, yes, per conventional standards, because she's a nurse. She's used to diagnoses and names and labels. I said, yeah, I mean, but understand what that is. It's just a name that we gave to a group of symptoms. When my dad last May went for his annual physical and his blood sugar was 300, there's no denying he had that much sugar in his blood. They pulled it out and looked, and you count the glucose molecules. It's not a denial of what the facts are in the blood. So they labeled my dad with a word called diabetes. And if he would have gone to the American Diabetes Association.com website, he would have read, diabetes is a chronic progressive disease. It will need to be managed for the rest of your life with medication. Eventually, the medication will quit working and you'll need insulin. That's a paraphrase off their website. If his mind had submitted to that system that website, that definition, that I'm putting it in quotes here, truth. It's not the truth. It's somebody's way of thinking. Well, he didn't. He got 4 prescriptions that day because his blood pressure was high too. So when the number's high, when you put that cuff around there, we label that with a name called hypertension. But what does that even mean? It just means your number's high. Well, why? Remember etiology, unknown etiology? If he were to go ask his PCP in Belton, Texas, where'd that come from? I'm sure the PCP is a great guy. But he doesn't know where that comes from because he wasn't taught that. Neither was I. And that's what shocked me 12, 13 years ago when Roby Mitchell told me type 2 diabetes is totally reversible. Watch this guy on YouTube. And I stayed up all night watching this guy, and his A1C went from 11 to 5 in like no time. It was amazing. The A1C is your 3-month blood sugar average. So my dad called Emily, who's one of the wellness navigators, and 90 days later, his blood sugar is totally normal. His blood pressure is normal. So you can remove those labels. And that's what I was trying to convince the lady yesterday, the patient yesterday. It's a label. And those symptoms are real. I mean, her joints are swollen and inflamed, and her shoulder gets stuck like this, she says sometimes. And by lunch, she can kind of get it off that stuck. So we're not denying the label, the symptoms. We're saying you don't, because the theory she was operating under was her immune system just woke up one day and went berserk. When she was 15 years old, her immune system decided her joints were no longer hers. Thought that was some rain coming down on a sunny day. Okay, that's a theory, berserk theory. Your immune system just goes berserk. That theory is rooted in Darwinian biology. We evolved from nothing, out of nothing, to pond scum, to this, and me and this are the same thing, coming from the same thing. That's modern medicine, is roots are there. We're just not highly evolved enough. And therefore, the immune system can just go berserk one day for no reason and attack yourself. That's a theory. That's the only theory I knew in medical school. So I taught her 2 other theories, molecular mimicry theory and germ theory. I'm not going to go through those now. You can get on the autoimmune class on the website, watch it. Back to the common denominator, mitochondrial dysfunction. So when you don't have enough B vitamins and you don't have enough magnesium and copper and you don't have enough sunlight, those photons click into this mitochondria. When you sit all day and you don't oxygenate well, your mitochondria suffers. And when you can't make energy in a cell, this is what Dr. Tennant was saying, and he needed more than just nutrition. He needed the voltage. And now he's saying you actually need to get your unresolved emotions. It affects the mitochondria. Everything points back to this mitochondria. If you're going to kind of progressive, alternative, think outside the box kind of doctors, they're all going to agree it's the mitochondria. Here's all these different diseases. Mitochondrial disease. You can read this book all about the mitochondria and the diseases of the mitochondria. So you could say the root cause of all disease is mitochondrial dysfunction, which means your carburetor needs a tune-up. Your carburetor is very, very, very inefficient. You're not making enough miles per gallon and you're making way too much exhaust. That causes your cell, whether it be your heart cell, your brain cell, your hamstring cell, the cartilage in your knees, you name it. It's not working right. Your white blood cell, if it doesn't have enough energy, cannot go get COVID and flu and TB and gobble it up and deal with it. 90% of the people, they look back in the day with polio, 90% of people had polio in their gut and had no symptoms because they were stewarding their terrain. Their terrain was so strong, it kept that thing from affecting them. So make energy, clear the exhaust. How do you do that? Don't get stuck in M1. When your mitochondria gets stuck in M1, M1 is pro-inflammatory. We need inflammation. I just cut my finger. You probably can't see that yesterday with the knife. I sure wanted my mitochondria in my macrophage to flip to M1. I needed that pro-inflammatory process to kick in because there were some germs. It was a dirty knife. There were germs that got into that. So I need that mitochondria to go pro-inflammatory, cytokines and histamines and leukotrienes, and I need it to go kill the germs that got into that cut. I need it to go burn up all the debris of the cells that are damaged. There's skin cells damaged, there's blood vessel cells damaged, maybe a little tendon or something. There's damaged. We need to gobble all that up and clean it out, get the debris out. So when you have trauma, when you have infection, and just your cells are dying every day. Every cell of your body is dying every day. Your red blood cells live for 90 days and they die. The rods and cones in your eyes, 48 hours and they die. Your gut every 4 days, your skin every 4 weeks, your liver cells every 8 weeks. We're constantly needing to get those things and gobble them up and recycle and deal with them, and debris needs to be gone. But trauma and infection, we really need to go to M1. Pro-inflammatory, kill and destroy, clean it up, remodel. But then we got to flip to M2. M2 is the anti-inflammatory, the repair and the regenerate. We've got to repair those cells. We got to build new cells. We got to bring stem cells in to regrow the cartilage in your knee. The body's designed to regrow and regenerate. So it's beautiful. It's amazing, the design of this thing. M1, M2. The problem is we get stuck in M1. The standard American who sits all day, stresses out too much, devoid of nutrition, devoid of gut microbes, devoid of oxygen because of small airways and sleep apnea all night long, that gets us stuck in M1. I went to a conference on the mitochondria. George Washington University put it on, their integrated medical department. And they gave all these great lectures on all these amazing studies and research. The top mitochondria researchers, PhDs, were there. It's really cool. This is a few years ago. And then they gave all these protocols to try to get unstuck, B vitamins and different nutrients and different things. Lots of gadgets, ozone, and different things. And then I came back a year or two after that to the same mitochondria conference, George Washington, and they came back and said, well, guys, all that stuff we taught you, it was right. It wasn't that it was not right. But what we've discovered is there's more to the story. In some people, just giving them the B vitamins work. And some people, just doing X, Y, or Z works. But then in those who are non-responders, who don't get well, there's something else keeping them stuck in M1, and we're not sure what that is. Well, I have my thoughts on what that is. But before I get into that, here's some of the stuff you can do to get unstuck. Don't be a standard American. Your standard American sits, stresses, eats processed sugar. Mostly that's high fructose corn syrup, which demolishes this carburetor. Sifted grain, seed oil, snoring, and smoking. Notice all S's. Thought that was kind of creative for a left-brained guy. So don't do that. Don't be a standard American. Or you're going to get standard American results, which we're the sickest people. I haven't hammered that home enough. So get more ancestral. Our great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, 100 years ago, there's hardly any cancer in this country, and there are no heart attacks, the top 2 killers in America now. Autoimmune disease, there's 100 autoimmune diseases in America, and there used to be 0. Alzheimer's is leapfrogging up the chart of top 10 killers in America. It's really quick going to be number 3. If you take out the doctors and their medical errors. So more ancestral is get some sun, get some salt, sea salt, not a table salt. You need all the minerals. You need strength and stretching, move. You need sleep. You need sustenance. Sustenance is God food, not man food. Food God intended for you to eat, which are plants and the beast. Genesis 9, God says you got to eat the beast too now. And I think he knew we were going to so missteward the soil that the vegetable and the apples and the carrots and all that was going to go as far as nutrition. So those animals concentrate all that nutrition in their muscle, but more in their organs. Sustenance is really important. So good sugar, no problem. God's sugar, no problem. Unsifted grain, whole, fresh milled, Wonder Mill, that's no problem. There's tons of nutrition, 70 different nutrients in that fresh milled wheat berry. And then sunlight eating window. Eat when the sun's up, basically. And so in the winter, it's not up as much. But don't just graze all day long, all night long, like many standard Americans do. So here's the unstuck experts. The point of all this, standard American versus ancestral, and the whole root cause is we're stuck in M1. So you need an expert of how to get unstuck. So I'm going to call up Our unstuck experts, just kidding. Y'all don't have to come up here. They just flipped into fight or flight mode a little bit. Angie Romans is an unstuck expert. She'll help you get unstuck. These are our wellness navigators. Nicole Powell is an unstuck expert. Oh, Angie, she's on second Wednesdays at 10 a.m. This is on the live Zooms for the community groups. Fourth Tuesdays at noon is Nicole. Bella Scott, who y'all saw earlier with the raffle, Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Emily at Thursdays at 6. Heather's 7 a.m. on third Wednesday. Ashley's fourth Thursday at 2. Go see an unstuck expert. They will help you learn this. They will help you implement it. There's an easier way to do it. Doesn't have to be huge and horrible and stressful. You can be a non-standard American. There's a way to get it done pretty easily, actually. It's no big deal. Just reset your habits. You got to have the knowledge, got to have the foundation. They'll walk with you, and they'll get you there. And your body will start to function. I had a guy who all he did was start sitting outside drinking his coffee in the morning, and he texted me. He wears a continuous glucose monitor because he's kind of a health nut and wants to track his blood sugar all day and all night, and he had been for a long time. And it's slowly been rising because he's eating keto, low carb. You can't do that for a long time or you'll actually raise your blood sugar and get insulin resistant. And that's another story. But his average daily blood sugar dropped 10 points, and all he did was implement the sunshine. So these may seem like little bitty things that aren't that big of a deal. They're a big deal. So get with your unstuck expert, and they'll walk you through that. Last little piece, and then I got to get. Hippocrates also said it's more important to know what sort of person has a disease than to know what sort of disease a person has. This is the most important thing, in my opinion, of everything I'm going to say today. You can eat perfect, move perfect, hydrate perfect, remineralize, eat liver every single day, and still be stuck in M1. The guys at George Washington came back and told us that. There's something else going on, keeping people stuck in M1. My mentor, this is my main mentor, Roby Mitchell. He's the one God ordained to cross my path when I didn't even know what the word holistic meant, never heard of integrative or functional. I was 100% allopathic. Both my granddads were allopathic. 2 uncles are allopathic MDs. Nurses in the family. Great-granddad was an MD. I didn't know what a chiropractor did, and they do some amazing things, by the way. And Roby Mitchell comes into my life, and he told me, Ben, there's no such thing as diseases. They're all consequences. And if you weren't born with it, you probably don't need to keep it. And if you'd be a good doctor and investigate and dig and listen and spend some time and use your brain, don't just go the protocol, you'll actually help people. And I didn't believe him. And I thought he was a quack. And I argued with him. And I brought out my intellectual arguments and all my textbooks and all my medical school stuff. And for a year, I argued with him on the phone until he said, send me your 10 sickest patients. The worst: fibromyalgia, lupus, diabetic, chronic prostatitis that won't go away, urticaria. And I did, and they all came back well. And so I had to set my intellect aside and my compassion and love for the patient. And I went to med school to help patients get better. And these I couldn't help, and neither could all the experts. And even UT Southwestern couldn't help that lupus lady. And they get better in 3, 4, or 5 months. It's amazing. Dr. Roby Mitchell, AKA Dr. Fit, if you knew him, F-I-T-T, that was his nickname on Facebook and on the internet. And he was fit. He was super fit. He was mid-50s when I met him, and he could outrun me, out-bench press me, out-pull-up me, out-one-arm push-up me, which I could do 0, and he could do a bunch. And when he first came to Post, Texas, to put me in my place, pretty much, but not really, but sort of. And it was lunchtime, and he said, "Where do you eat lunch around here, Ben?" This is in Post. And I said, well, we have a McDonald's, a Sonic, Holly's Drive-In, Burgers, Choppa's Mexican food, and a Subway, pretty much. That's it. And I said, is Subway like the healthiest of those? And he said, well, don't you have a grocery store? I'm like, well, yeah, but you don't go there for lunch. It's a little tiny United, not like with a food court. So this little tiny United, and he walked in there. He said, come on, I'll show you how to be a modern day hunter-gatherer. And we walked in there and he hit the perimeter and he pulled some lettuce and an apple and some almonds and some Perrier water and some just real food. And he said, this is our lunch. And he opened up the bag of spinach and just started eating with his fingers and the almonds, and thought, okay. But he taught me, Ben, if you will eat superfoods, don't just drink green tea, put nutmeg, cardamom, and allspice and all the good herbs and spices in there, because there's medicine in those spices. Doctor up your drinks. Go to the ethnic food like Thai food, because they use spices and the spices have the medicine. And he taught me how to eat and doctor things up healthy. I never saw anything past Roby's mouth, food or drink, that wasn't a superfood. It was amazing. And he put a 100-pound backpack on, full fatigues. He's ex-Marine. And he'd run around the Amarillo Medical Center in 100-degree heat. No problem. And he'd stop and do push-ups and pull-ups along the way. And as you can see, this is probably when he was 60. And prostate cancer came into Roby's life in his early 50s, and diabetes, or before that, a lot of things. And he reversed all of them with the unstuck things, nutrition, hydration, and movement. And I saw those prostate, the PSA and the biopsy and the PET scans, and I saw him go to negative. He overcame cancer with the 3 pillars and with some extra nutrition, extra gadgets, extra supplements, extra natural protocols. But it came back on him, and he overcame it again. And I saw those numbers, and it came back on him again. And in 2020, he called me, and at that moment, it was way overcoming him. And Roby was really smart, and he knew he was really smart. But his medical license got pulled years ago. So he needed me to write prescriptions. So I was his doctor, but he never called me to really be his doctor. He called me when he needed he needed an MD to write for a PET scan or a prescription. So I'd go up to Amarillo and see him once he got so bad he couldn't get out of his house and was pretty much bedbound, and the cancer was all over. And I said, Roby, we got to do more than there's other doctors we can call. You can go to, had plenty of money. So you can go to Germany, you can go to Japan, you can go to Mexico. There's lots of smart guys that can be a team. No, Ben, we got this, me and you. I said, we don't got anything, Roby. Yeah, I mean, he's down to like 100 pounds at this point. And I said, Roby, we've got to get deeper. This keeps coming back on you. You're doing all this stuff. There's deeper stuff. I got that. I did some mushrooms and different things, and I went to Brazil and did some ayahuasca. And then at the very end, when we really got to talk about stuff, he knew there were some deeper things, and he couldn't really get there and deal with that. And at the very end, in his last few days, he said, Ben, I've organized a medical conference. It's been in the works for a year. Doctors coming from around the country to Amarillo for a 3-day conference. I'm the keynote. Obviously, I can't give that speech because I'm in bed and I'm dying. And will you go in my place and speak for me? But he said, I want you to speak on the spiritual and emotional roots of disease. I said, are you sure about that? He said, yep, the people need to know. And so I did. That was in 2020. He passed away December 2020. I gave the eulogy at his funeral. And I already knew this, but then I really got it even more. And today, 4 years later, even more understanding in my heart and belief in my heart to get truly unstuck and be well and not need a doctor, which is our goal, You've got to do more than just do the physical. You can't do more than what Dr. Fit did. You can't get more fit than him. You can't eat and hydrate and move better than he did, guaranteed. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. I was under the influence of this guy, Darwin, and all the doctors are, and the medical system is. And we don't even know it. I did not understand. I'd submitted to 5 days a week for 12 years this religion. Of course, they didn't call it a religion. It's what it is. It is what has infiltrated our medical system, our scientific, quote unquote. There's a thinking, and it's a religious thinking that blinds us. And we accidentally submitted to it as a people group, as a culture. And we've got to start unwinding that thinking and bringing the truth to it. This guy was used in his own intellect to try to think of things in his own mind. This guy, Jesus Christ, came to heal your heart. And your heart is programming your mitochondria. Guaranteed. That's what's happening. That carburetor is responding to your heart, and your heart is your beliefs about God and self, I believe. And people don't want to go there. People are hurting. People want a pill to fix it. They want a supplement to fix it. And I get it. And that lady yesterday, I told her, don't stop any of your medicine. And in fact, here's some other stuff you can do if you want to. So it's not the either or. But I made it real clear to her. I do not recommend spending the next 6 months, 12 months, 2 years focused on these physical things I'm about to write down for you to consider to implement in your plan. Go after your heart. When you get the heart lined up, tuned in, that vibrational frequency like a tuning fork, more and more tuned into truth, your mitochondria is going to get so resilient, it will be able to function even without all the B vitamins, all the minerals, and all the things it needs. I've seen it over and over and over. And I've seen people on all the supplements and been all the integrative clinics all over the place, doing it all. I talked to a lady at KetoCon. I was speaking at that conference in Austin a few weeks ago, and she was crying after my talk when I said, don't make keto your God. And she looked at all these different booths in the place and said, I've spent $500 on these supplements here and that booth there, and they're all good supplements and good quality things. $400,000 in 13 years she'd spent trying to get well. But her mindset was being influenced by this guy. I've got just a few minutes real quick. You've all Noah Harari, because I want to really drive this home. He's a lead advisor to Klaus Schwab. Klaus Schwab wrote this book, COVID-19, The Great Reset. But he's Schwab is a World Economic Forum guy. So this guy, Yuval, is giving counsel to the guys in the all the world government people. Here's what Yuval says. If you have enough data and computing power, you can understand people better than they can understand themselves. And then you can manipulate them in ways that are previously impossible. Humans are hackable animals. I think maybe in a couple decades when people look back, they will think this is the moment that everything went digital and everyone agreed to be surveyed all the time. And maybe most importantly of all is that the moment the surveillance started going under the skin. The whole idea that humans have a soul and spirit and free will, that's over. We need to come to terms with that fact. I mean, all this story about Jesus rising from the dead, being Son of God, that's fake news. What's the world look like when it's dominated by super intelligent but non-conscious algorithms? We're in the process of turning ourselves into gods, and I mean this in the most literal sense possible. It's not a metaphor. The revolution in information technology will make dictatorships more efficient than democracies. I think the biggest question in economics and politics will be, what will we do with all these useless people? The problem is more boredom. And what do you do with them? How will they find meaning in life when they're basically meaningless and worthless? My best guess, drugs and computer games. Science is not really about truth, it's about power. That is the kind of thinking when a man in his own mind makes himself the God, the source of all. That is where the world is going. That is where science is going. I just saw yesterday that verbal and eyewitness accounts will soon no longer be admissible in court. But the way they can AI my face and my voice, 3 seconds of this voice is all a computer needs. They had someone call a 14-year-old girl on her phone, got 3 seconds of her voice, AI'd it, and called the mama with that AI'd voice of that little girl saying, I'm kidnapped and there's $1 million ransom and please pay it right now. And it was all AI'd. And I'm not saying this to bring fear. What I'm saying is we've got to look at the reality of where if we let our mind and our heart go one way and not understanding what we've submitted to versus the truth. Jesus came to change our heart. All this information I gave you today, information doesn't change your heart. Remember, the heart programs your mitochondria, and information changes your mind, but not your heart. This is a heart issue. This is what I believe. A heart that believes, not a mind that is informed. That's where we got to get. The eyes of our heart determine the actions of our cells. The eyes of our heart. We've got to move beyond our intellect because our intellect is just our intellect. And we have a left brain for a reason, but we have a right brain for a reason too. The left brain's been brought up to prominence and the right brain's been negated, degraded. Jesus came not to get you to heaven. He came to destroy the works of the devil. He came to reveal the Father. He came to set the captives free, open the blind eyes of your heart, and heal the brokenhearted. He came so that you'll know the God that created everything loves you. He's not mad at you. He's not expecting anything from you. He doesn't need you to be a servant or a slave. He wants you to be his family, his kid. He is a loving Father. And if anyone has told you anything different than that, you need to talk to him about it. Jesus himself said, how can you say, what's God like? Who's God like? Tell me about God. I came to show you what he's like. If you've seen me, you know what God's like. I was just reading this morning. Jesus got invited to this Pharisee. Pharisee has it all together, knows everything. He's right about everything, has it all put together. This one was rich. Asked Jesus, come to my house for a banquet. Imagine going to some rich, powerful person in Lubbock or wherever you're at, the house for a banquet. And then a lady from the street sneaks into that banquet, i.e. a prostitute, and washed Jesus' feet with her hair and her tears and a really expensive oil. And the rich, powerful guy who knows it all said, you know where she got that money to buy that oil that she's putting on your feet. Go study how Jesus acted to that lady, a prostitute. Really put yourself in those shoes. A woman from the street walks in. A woman in adultery gets caught in the act. Go see what Jesus said to her and said to all the people trying to judge her. Jesus told us what to do, how to live with each other. And he said, don't judge or you'll be judged. You can observe and you can look at the fruit and examine the fruit, and that will give you wisdom on how to interact with somebody. You can't judge the motives in their heart. Someone walks by you and doesn't say something, judge them. When you judge that, you're creating division between you and that person. Jesus told us not to do that. And I do it all the time. We all do it, I think. He said, when you're offended, don't tell anybody. What do you do when you get offended? I know what I do. I go tell somebody. There's a way that seems right to man. Jesus came to show us this is how you're going to interact with each other so that you can love. God is love. He loves you. He made you to love him. If you love him and love your neighbors yourself, you're good to go. So the enemy convinces us God's mad at us. He's mean. He's actually oppressive. And this idea that God is in control of everything is from the devil. Because Lucifer uses that to tell the world, look, God's in control of everything. And this little girl that just got raped, this little baby that just died, and all this evil in the world, it's because of his fault. Because he's in control of everything. And he uses that to twist it. And the people that worship Lucifer, he tells them, I'm the light. I'm actually the deliverer, going to deliver you from that oppressive God. I will enlighten you with knowledge and science. That's the scheme. God is God, Alpha, Omega. He made it all, but he's restrained himself and he put you in charge of the earth. That sounds crazy to some people I know. But if you get out of here because I'm running late, and if I decide to speed to the airport and I get pulled over and I miss my flight, was God in control of my foot on the speeding pedal, on the gas pedal? No, he's not. And God forbid I would run a red light and run into somebody and maybe accidentally take their physical life. You can't die if you're a spirit, you're going back home. But I'm just saying, we have decisions to make in the earth. And that mitochondria is resonating off love or fear. Every good and positive emotion that you could have is rooted in love. And every other negative emotion that's killing your mitochondria is rooted in fear. We've got to dig and push into this thing. And it's not about religion and church. It's about you talking to God. What do I believe about you that's not true? And when that started for me, it was 17 years ago, and I didn't even know if God was real. I'd raised in church my whole life, but like I said, 5 days a week, I was at Darwin Church. And I had tons of doubt and unbelief. So I had to express that to him. And I'm talking to something that's invisible, can't hear him, can't see him, touch him. Now I can hear him, but back then. And I don't even know if he's real, but I'm talking to him. Why? Because I was hurting. Because we couldn't get pregnant for 24 straight months. And when we're in pain, we'll turn to stuff, hopefully to God. And even though I wasn't sure if he was real, I started talking to him. And the verse that sent me there was seek the kingdom first. And I got Jamie and I said, look at that. It says seek the kingdom first. And we're seeking a baby for 24 straight months. We got 24 negative pregnancy tests in our drawer of our bathroom drawer. And this says seek the kingdom first. We got on our knees. We said, I'm sorry. We shouldn't be doing this. It's your way, not our way. Thank you for our life that you've given us. And if we don't have kids in you, that's no problem. We're good. And my very next thing was, show me what the kingdom is, because I have no idea what that even means. Nobody taught me. My very next one was, I believe, help me with my unbelief, because I had tons of unbelief. That was 17 years ago, and it's just been kingdom, 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 more and more and more. And we're still on our journey, and I sure don't know it all. But one thing I know 100% for sure, that I wish I would have known better earlier. But I want y'all to know now, you cannot hydrate and nutrient exercise yourself to health. And I'm not saying don't steward your physical, we need to. But the kingdom first. And if you don't know what that is, get with your navigator. And I don't have it all figured out, guys. But I know one thing. The kingdom has a king. And that means there's a Lord of my life. And no one taught me that. Jesus will get me to heaven. I believed in Jesus out of fear and manipulation, not burning hell all my life, the rest of my eternity. I had no idea about lordship. He's got to be Lord of the heart who influences the mitochondria. Fear drives a mitochondria to deficiency and insufficiency, and love will set you free. And Jesus came to do that, not religion. I'm talking the one who created you wanted to manifest himself to you personally, and he did it through Jesus. So look at his life and seek him and talk to him, and he will talk to your heart, and he will transform your heart, and the truth will set you free. A doctor can't set you free. A supplement or pharmaceutical can't set you free. You can be set free. And we need it in these days more than ever. We've been wandering around in the wilderness for a long time. You want to know what God's will is? The Garden of Eden. He came every day looking for his son and his daughter to be with them because he loves them and wanted to be with them and talk to them every day. Man's choice resulted in something else. God didn't want that. God didn't want 2 million Israelites wandering around the desert for 40 years. He wanted them in the promised land. They did not trust. 2 got in. God didn't want to build a temple. God didn't want to give them a king. Man wanted to do lots of things, and we still do. We've been wandering around the desert for a long time, and the season is now to enter the kingdom, walk in the kingdom, trust, and make him Lord of every area of your life. And that means when someone offends you, what would Jesus say and do in that moment? And if there's something in your heart blocking this trusting of God, you cannot love something you don't trust. You've got to have that conversation. I got to go. Here's the root cause of all disease, not knowing the truth about God and self. Start there. What you believe about God that's not true. What do you believe about yourself that's not true? God will show you. He will speak to you. You are designed, like a radio is designed to dial in and tune into AM and FM. Do we still have those kind of radios? Dials, I know. We don't have dials. I'm old. There are AM waves right now in this room. There's FM waves in this room right now. They're short waves. If we had a shortwave radio, anybody do shortwave? You can dial in that thing and you'll pick up shortwave. Your mitochondria, your heart, you are designed with a tuner in there, and it will tune into the voice of the one who made you. Wouldn't you want to talk to the one who made you if you've got a symptom, a disease, or a problem? You are designed that way. You are designed to be bathed in peace and joy when you're rightly aligned in your thinking with the one who created you, who is love. You rightly align your thinking that way, peace and joy attend you and bathe your mitochondria, and it will function right, and even if you're drinking high fructose corn syrup. Don't tell anybody I said that. All right, Nicole's giving me I got to go. My wife is 50-50 chance that I'm going to make this. All right, guys, thank y'all for being here.